This is a paid review on the Emeet Piko Plus 4K webcam, and it's quite possibly the cutest webcam I think I've ever seen. And to be fair, it does get even cuter when you attach the magnetic privacy cover on the front. This comes with a unique dual lens design, and these work together, which helps you get quick autofocus and compensate for low light situations. Straight off the bat, there's one issue you may run into, and that is the fact that you cannot mount this onto your monitor. You are relying on the included tripod or a tripod of your own to get it mounted, and to be honest, whilst the included one does do the job, it doesn't stand very high, so you may be better off getting something yourself. And the other issue is that you may struggle to hide that USB cable with it not being mounted on your screen and hiding down the back. But the included USB cable is USB-C on one end that goes into the back of the webcam, and you get both USB-C and USB-A on the other end, so it's compatible with pretty much everything. This is also capable of 4K at 30 frames per second, or you can drop that resolution down to 1080 and get 60 frames per second. Beginning in a dark room with just the glow coming from our monitor, and this is very good. I can be seen clearly, and the colours on my hoodie stand out. Do expect some grain and pixelation in the background, but that is just because there's no light there. But if you do have a darker image on your screen, then this will generate more grain and you'll lose some of the detail in your face. When you switch from a dark image to a bright one, you will become overexposed, but it does a really good job at auto compensating for this, and it adjusts quickly and produces a pretty good image, with natural light coming in through the window down the one side of me, and it's not too bad. I am a little overexposed where that light is coming in, which I kind of expected, but the image does look pretty crisp and the movement does look as though we are getting those full 30 frames per second in the 4K mode. There is some focus hunting if you do move around too much in front of the camera, but it does hold the focus when you are not. The exposure can be manually configured in software like OBS, and it can also be controlled in the Emeet Studio software, which we'll come on to shortly. Using it with a window directly behind me, and this produces a really dark image, and I find it keeps grabbing the focus of what's going on behind me, back to me, and back behind me again. So I did experience a lot of focus hunting, especially when I started waving my hands around. But if you do install that Emeet Studio software, there is actually a toggle switch there, and you can turn on backlight contrast. This makes everything really bright, but we can be seen now. But there is that much light that basically, if I got up and turned around and walked towards the light, I'll be leaving planet Earth. But you can improve things by moving the sliders in the Emeet Studio software. The one problem here is that nothing is labelled, so it's trial and error to figure out which one's for the exposure, which one for the contrast. And when I did manage to change the exposure, once again this was trial and error, because sometimes when I darken the image a little bit, the movement's very choppy. If you make it too dark, the movement's great, but obviously it's too dark. So you will need to play around with these settings to get the best image for your own scenario. Using ring lights in front of us, and this delivers a nice crisp image. So much so that my cat jumped down and wanted to take a closer look. There is some pixelation happening in the background, but once again that's because there's no lights back there. The movement is still looking good on there, but bear in mind that autofocus is quite sensitive, so do expect some focus hunting the more you are moving around. I put my hand up to the lens and moved it away quickly to see if anything really funky happened with the colours, but this handled it really well. Now if you don't have any ring lights but you're using just a room light, then this is how it's going to look. Obviously do expect this to look a little different in your own scenario, because it's going to depend on where your light is positioned and where you're positioned on your computer. So it should be good enough for those Zoom and team calls, and if people on the other end are not happy with how it looks, just ask them to buy you some ring lights. Switching on some backlights behind us, and they seem to handle that well too. The image is still looking crisp. The one thing I did notice is that when I moved around, the auto exposure kicks in and gets rid of that subtle glow that was down the one side of my face, and made the image look even better. Again, that sensitive autofocus does still kick in when you are moving around, so do bear that in mind. Switching to the 1080p 60 frames per second mode, and you can see immediately how crisp that movement is. It still delivers a good looking picture, but there is a noticeable difference when you do decrease from 4K down to 1080p. So it's going to be a toss up on, do you prioritise that crispy 4K image, or do you prefer the fluent movement of the 1080p? Focusing on an object in my hand, and this performs exceptionally well. You can bring the object up to like an inch or two away from the lens and it will keep it in focus. Moving it away and close to the lens quickly was no problem for the Piko Plus. Now autofocus is rapid. If you need to focus on something like an ID card where you need to grab those details from there, then you're going to have no issues with this. Removing a green screen in OBS, and this performed really well. It removed the green screen with no issues at all. Now this is without messing with any sliders in OBS. The only thing I can be critical on, which is very harsh, is that there's some flickering on the outline of my hoodie, which you should be able to remove with the sliders in OBS, and some pixelation on my chair, but this is more to do with my own lighting setup than the actual camera itself. This is a microphone test of the Emeet Piko Plus. This is the kind of audio you can expect straight out of the box. The Emeet software allows you to adjust that field of view all the way from 73 degrees down to 51, and this helps prevent a lot of your background being on display. You do get controls of the focus too. We have the face focus, we have center focus, or you can use the custom focus, which puts this blue box on the screen which you can drag around and it will focus on that part of your frame. This box cannot be shrunk or expanded. Now, one issue I did notice in the software is that you can't switch it to 1080p in 60 frames per second. So at the time of this video, you will need to use something like OBS to be able to do this, but hopefully this will be resolved in a future update with the software.